Hello, tribe. Welcome back to Doc and the Poet. I am Dr. Brooke Taylor, also known as the Doc, here with Mr. Devin Porter, my friend and partner in crime, also known as the Poet. Today's fireside chat, before we kick off, I always like to know, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Brooke, and always look forward to doing these. And was checking out of the supermarket the other day, and there was 4 people in front of me, and the guy said, "How you doing?" "Good."
Uh-oh.
"How you doing?" "Good." And by the time I got up there, he said, "How you doing?" I was like, "Unbelievable! This is it." And he was like, "Are you really?" And I said, "No, I'm just good." But I said I wanted to give you something a little different. So yeah, bottom line, I'm doing great, Brooke, and looking forward to our topic for today.
I'm glad to hear about it, and just thank you as always for opening your home. Kelsey and Devin, their farm is beautiful. It's a treat to always be in the library and to have the chat. But today's conversation to the tribe, check out, if you're new to the channel, some of our old episodes, or older, I guess, newer. We've been around for a few months now. But our question, 10 minutes, we'll take it on, is kind of this idea of hope. What is hope? So that's a fundamental part of this channel, is bringing back respect, this idea of hope, into what we see as polarized, kind of toxic narrative. But what actually is hope?
Well, yeah, and can we make it contagious? Can we figure out a way to spread our hope?
Oh, I
Because
like
that's what
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do. We typically have a broadly sort of centrist way of looking at things, and we try to find common ground between this toxic divide that's in our culture. And hope is one of our buzzwords. One of the first things this makes me think of is that JFK had a quote that wasn't one of his more well-known quotes, and that quote was, "Radical centrism is idealism without illusions." Now, radical centrism was an obscure political philosophy that a bunch of eggheads got together, and around the time of JFK, they sort of said, "This is neat," and it was meant to be a sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, is that centrism is this radical idea, So Brooke and I sort of toyed with that, and we sort of came up with what we are growing into. We are building a political, social, sort of cultural philosophy that we have taken to calling practical centrism. And one of the tenets of practical centrism is hope, And so when you look at that JFK quote, idealism without illusions, what do you take away from that? And I think for me, I take away from, absolutely we have to have hope, and we need to be realistic about it. We need to understand what we're hoping for, and we need to be taking concrete steps. Because if you're not doing that, you're not being specific about it, then it's going to be very difficult for you to see results. But in the idea of specificity in the area of hope, and the idea of trying to make ways to have hope become contagious. All right, what are you thinking there, Brooke?
I love the question to frame it, is hope contagious? And your reference to the JFK quote in our earlier episodes, when we kind of asked the idea of what is this American dream, and we spoke about the idea of hope as part of kind of the American spirit, and I think it belongs to the nation. On the opposite end of the spectrum, political party, President Ronald Reagan, he was a leader that inspired hope across the nation, and so I think it belongs not to a party, but to the people that are American society, American culture. And if we want to preserve kind of the narrative of our nation, I would hope that hope is contagious, because without it, we're stuck with being pigeonholed into the toxic divide of the left or to the right. And so in spreading hope, how do you do it? I think it's with decency and respect. I think you can have a backbone of steel for your convictions, and to stand tall, and kind of the rooted authority to which you stand professionally or personally, kind of your opinions or ideas. But if you become so kind of, I think, polarized or narrow-minded that it's my way or the highway, I think that puts out the fire of hope.
Yeah, and that resonates with Brooke. It's the my way or the highway. And I have 2 comments about that. As one, as a writer, Brooke, and I'll admit this to you, sometimes I'll see a turn of phrase and I'll be jealous. I'll be like, I wish I had come up with that. And the audacity of hope is one of those phrases. I mean, what an amazing turn of phrase, because it's actually telling you a story. It's saying, I'm bold enough to have hope for the future.
Yes.
And the other thing, Brooke, that when you say my way or the highway, I think that we've talked about this many times, is that you've got this small 10% on either side that are going like this, and then the rest of us are stuck in the middle. And both sides are saying, my way or the highway. They're saying, this is it, and if this doesn't work, then we're done.
Yeah.
And both sides are saying that. And that is the exact opposite of hope.
Yes.
Right? And so our centrist philosophy, we believe, is the most hopeful philosophy, because we truly do have the belief, and we do have the hope, and I certainly hope it's not naive, but we do have that in us, that we can create a new conversation. We can create a positive and more importantly, a respectful, loving conversation that is going to bring us out of this muck, because for one side or the other to say my way or the highway, and if there is no compromise, right? If we don't do it exactly the way that I want, then we are lost, right? I think that has a pretty big effect on the lack of hope for some of these core, sort of crazy sides on either side.
It does, and I think at the same time, Devin, to realize this, we're throwing, I guess, quotes out, that hope is not a strategy. It's not a pie in the sky kind of idea. I don't take ownership of that phrase. I use it in a lot of the wargaming work that I do, that behind every idea, you have to have a smart strategy. Behind every political movement or philosophy, there's a core tenet of those beliefs, but when you look, if you have kind of a deliberate or measured outcome, what is the party or the platform or the policy that inspires to say, I believe in you, we can be better, we can do better, we can solve this, versus this you and me, and we're against these odds. It's not helpful to the conversation. It's not who we are as a channel. But to make something contagious, it is to say, okay, we see it differently. The strategy is we are going to figure this out, because the reality is that every decision and every choice, that if it is pigeonholed into these divisive party lines, it impacts your life no matter what.
Yeah, and hope is not a strategy, and I've heard you say this a few times, Brooke, and definitely it's something that sticks with you. And I think I could sort of add to that. We say hope is not a strategy. Hope is absolutely essential, but it's not enough. Because if you're fighting the good fight, and you're out there and you lose hope, and that's it. Is that you might as well just give up. And I think that's what happens when you do lose hope. And so, it's essential. We have to have it. We have to have it. But I think we need to go one step further. We can't just hope that things are going to work out. It was like the old, it was sort of a religious story, and it goes, there was a very religious person who was drowning. And they go, no, when a boat comes by, and they go, hey, do you need help? And they go, no, God will save me, and the boat goes, okay, and they go on, and then, another, ski-doo comes by, and they go, hey, do you need help? And they go, God will save me, and this happens the third time, person dies, and they drown, they go to St. Peter, and they said, hey, I thought I called to God, I thought God was going to help me, and they go, what do you think those three boats were? And so we have a big role to play in this hope, and when we want to make it contagious, and we want to build our tribe, and we want to spread this message of hope, we need to be specific, and we need to do our part and define what it is specifically that we're hoping for, what we're trying to get to, and we need to make sure that we don't have any illusions. And that goes back to that JFK quote, is that, we want to make the world a better place, but I think we don't have any illusions about the fact that, it's messy. Not everybody's going to be happy. We want to come up with something that the vast majority of people can agree with. Not everyone. We know that that's not possible. So we want to be specific, we want to be realistic with the hope that we have, but all the same, it is the most essential thing out there, I think.
I agree. We do not want the fire of hope to diminish. We want the burn to spread. And I would say, in regards of listening to you talk, hope cannot be defeated. And that the polarized view of the toxic divide that's present and rampant in the United States wants it to be defeated. And so I would say, let's come to the table of Doc and the Poet, and let's rely on the reality. We want the fire of hope to be flamed, and we know that in and of itself it's not a strategy. So together, let's talk about ways that we can make a difference through the dialogue of controversial issues, but with respect for those that think and feel differently.
Well, the good news is that it may take time, but hope and truth always may always come out on top. So I think with that, we'll leave you with that sort of positive note. And Brooke, you want to sign us out?
I love doing this with you, Devin. Tribe, thank you for being back, and we will see you next week for Doc and the Poet.
Like and subscribe. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.